It's dangerous.
And actually talking about those options, and I actually saw one of your plays with Brother Jeff Tyler. What play did we see, Brother Jeff? Love, Relationships, and Drama. That's the play we saw. And I think you talk about some of these issues in that particular play. So can you give us maybe the reason why? Well, so it seems as if it's not being glamorized, it's being minimized, but in the church we're trying to, if you will, quell any issues that are out there with like a love, relationships, and drama. Can you talk about that?
Well, one of the things that I'm experiencing, because I'm a pastor to parents as well as the children, and one thing, Dr. Lindsay, when you talk about being minimized, I think it's even minimized in the home from the standpoint of not even being discussed. And I'm seeing situations come about now where the young girl will come home pregnant and parents upset, but it's almost expected. And so when you see this expectation, it hurts me as a pastor. I look and I said, well, what are we teaching? Because, okay, the media's out here, that influence is going to be there. That's not going to change. It's going to get worse. But are we really teaching, taking that time to say, hey, listen, building up the godly character, building up the self-esteem, taking that time to really care. And that's where I think we're missing it in so many areas at home. Because many of us, we grow older, but we don't grow up. So when we think about it, we get older, but we still have our childish ways. And so when we don't break the childish ways within us, we pass them on to our children, and they repeat the cycle, and it goes on and on and on. So say we may have had a child at 19, if we don't grow up, if we don't mature, if we don't stop doing certain things, if we don't stop allowing these influences, if we don't take the time to change our mindset and instill what's right in our children, they'll repeat it. And so then we'll be there at the baby shower, hey, it's great, come on. But at some point we have to stop and say, hey, this is not what God intended for us. And so it's minimized, but then it's also not discussed.
And actually, so good point, good segue actually. Mr. Harper's book, Letters to a Young Brother, it's not discussed in the home. And so we have a gentleman such as Mr. Harper that writes a book on certain topics. And in fact, I have one of the questions that someone posed as it relates to teen relationships. It says, what relationship tips for high school teens do you think are the most important in this bootylicious, lappy-tappy, sexploitative culture? And in fact, I think we can stretch that beyond high school teenagers. I think we can stretch that to singles in general, okay? And so Hill, if you could, because in fact, in the book, it says there was a young man, one of the young man's emails, he was contemplating, I think it was kind of cheating on his girlfriend. And I think you posed a couple of solid questions and nuggets to him on this transitioning from a boyhood to manhood, and I think it was rooted in honesty. So if you could.
Well, I think that it starts with looking at actually what Dr. Marsh was talking about the roots. And we have to figure out from where a lot of our inclinations to make certain decisions come. Because if we start demystifying that, we can start to break it down and make our decision making much more simplistic. Because right is right and wrong is wrong. It's simple, but it's not easy. And so what's interesting about that is that I believe that many of our decisions that we make come out of a very simple four-letter word, which is fear. And fear stands for me, false evidence appearing real. We get hit with so much false evidence over the course of our lives. And Dr. Marsh mentioned the fact that 2/3 of our young people are being raised in fatherless households. Now, most people want to focus on the effect that has on the young man, not having a positive male role model in the house, but it also has effect on the daughter that doesn't have a father, because it affects the way she approaches males and wanting to please them or find a way to get them to love her. So we have to look at the root of how we start to navigate our choices vis-a-vis the opposite sex. And we have to look at, have we been given false evidence that appears real? The single parent household is false evidence that appears real. It's not true. It's not the way it's supposed to be. That being the case, how do we demystify things? And the same thing holds true for the entertainment. To speak on the entertainment issue, since I'm an entertainer, I know that in my business, we have done more to to decimate the self-esteem of young people over the past 15 years than any other industry. We've presented so much false evidence in my business that makes a young brother feel like that his self-esteem is inextricably linked to the size of the rims on his car, or whether he has a platinum Rolex or not. Made him think that his worth is attached to whether he can sleep with a girl that looks like this, or how many females he can have around him. And as soon as that idea starts to seep in, it becomes false evidence, but it appears real. Now, for young women, we convince them that the only way, this is through my business, these images, convince them that the only way a young man will actually be attracted to them if they dress a certain way, or speak a certain way, and act a certain way. Because their father's not there, so they're not being taught to be, how to have this wonderful love relationship with their father that is a natural love relationship. So therefore, what do they have? They see these images that my business puts out. So that's where I fit in. I had to say to myself, if I'm going to cash these large checks from my business, then I had to figure out a way to counteract, even though I don't play those roles, you see, or at least participate in those projects, because someone did point out to me, they said, well, I did a movie called In Too Deep where I played a drug dealer. So the thing is, it's not about the role, it's ultimately the message that the movie portrays, in my opinion. And for instance, if In Too Deep, if those of you who saw it, LL Cool J and I are drug dealers, and Omar Epps is the good guy, and Nia Long is the girl. If that movie would have ended, for instance, with LL Cool J and I sitting in a hot tub at the end with bottles of Cristal saying, dealing drugs is good, then I wouldn't have done that movie. But the movie ended with he and I going to jail, Omar Epps, who's actually doing the right thing, getting the girl, Nia Long, and they ride off in the sunset. Now, that may sound simple to you, the distinction of those two different endings, but they're actually very profound. Because one is sending a message that there are consequences to negative acts in our community. The other says there's no consequences. If you look at most of the videos you see, you don't see negative consequences associated with negative activity. You see? And that's what starts to trick your mind. And it starts to make you believe that this false evidence appears real. So to specifically get to that question about young men and young women in relationships, it's really about starting to peel the onion back as to why I want or feel like I need to take a certain action or not. And once you start to do that, you can begin to start to make your decisions based on real evidence, the truth. And I'll use hip-hop as a quick example. This is in a non-sex category, but Bow Wow has a song where one of his lyrics is, I'm under 21 with a black card. Who knows that song? You heard that lyric? I'm under 21. He's talking about what? Centurion card from American Express, a black card, right? Looks like this. And what does it represent? It represents unlimited credit, right? You can buy a house, $2 million, $5 million, whatever, with this card, right? And so he's bragging about it. He says, I'm under 21 with a black card. But it's false evidence appearing real because there's no reason to brag about a credit card. Right? Because he's actually bragging about the idea that he can give as much of his money he wants away to somebody else. Now, there's nothing wrong with having an unlimited line of credit because it actually serves you. Because the more credit you have, the higher your credit rating is, and it makes money that's available to you cheaper. So there's nothing wrong with having that. But, get it, wouldn't it be more accurate to brag about Ken Chenault, a black man who's CEO of American Express? So you just have to ask yourself, do you want to rent the black card and carry it around, or do you want to own the company that makes the black card? You see, that same holds true with the way we think about our relationships. Do we want to do the things that are presented to us in this very plain way that is actually false? Or do we want to sort of uncover it a little bit, say, okay, what is really going on? Because there's something good about being in a positive relationship. So it kind of sets you up. It's like, yeah, it's good. I'm going to be in a relationship that's positive. But then, it's just like having a black card. It's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But then when you start bragging about the idea of having it, that's when it starts to twist and go the wrong direction. And the same holds true with a love relationship. When you start to say, I need this person's affection and I need to be with them in a certain way to have that affection, that's where it's untrue. Because those types of things and those types of choices have nothing to do with whether you have a positive love relationship with someone or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
As a man, there's something, let's say when I was a teenager, I would have said, no, of course not. You know, hey, you want to have, there's nothing wrong with all female friends, but as a man, there's something that only another man can give you as far as a certain type of stability and connection. And there's certain things that women cannot give you. It's just a man thing, I guess. That's the best way to say it. I know that for me, I value the men that I have in my life. And I know that if I had a group of ladies around me, although they would be beneficial, they could not offer me what the men of God that I have in my life offer me, as far as the wisdom, the insight, understanding what it's like to be a man.